Throughout the entirety of human history, perhaps one of the most difficult regions to comprehend has been Russia. Studying Russian history has always been a complex and challenging subject, even for intellectuals, thinkers, and historians born within Russia itself. Despite all its complexity and depth, the importance of Russian history to the world, and especially to Europe, is undeniable. With its endless forests, mighty rivers, and vast steppes, Russian land has witnessed both some of humanity's greatest and most tragic events. It is impossible to evaluate the development of the states established throughout Russian history as a single unified whole. For centuries, this immense landmass has been ruled by governments that differed greatly from one another in both cultural and economic terms. Yet, just as every historical process has its own origin and evolution, it is still possible to trace the progression of Russian history. One of the most striking aspects of Russian history lies in its beginnings. In the 9th century, the dynasty that gained power over the peoples of Russia and ruled these lands for nearly 8 centuries was not even of Slavic origin. For 800 years, Russia remained under the rule of a family that was culturally and genetically distinct from the Slavic peoples, outsiders who came from beyond their lands. But how did such a situation come to be? To understand this, one must look back at Russia in the early 9th century and the conditions under which the Slavic peoples lived. The Slavs were a people divided into various tribes, inhabiting vast regions stretching from the northern areas around Novgorod down to the southern coasts of present-day Ukraine. These tribes traded with neighboring states and occasionally fought among themselves. No Slavic tribe could establish lasting dominance over the others, and the constant conflicts created ongoing unrest in the region. This instability weakened trade and made the Slavic territories insecure. While the Slavic lands were mired in war and uncertainty, the Vikings, living along the cold northern coasts, were setting sail across the world and entering what would become their own golden age. Europe at that time was engulfed in chaos. The Vikings would appear suddenly, plunder villages, and then vanish, only to return years later and repeat their raids. European kings were unable to find a short-term solution to this menace. As the Vikings grew wealthy from their raids, they began establishing permanent bases, kingdoms, and trade centers, making their operations more organized. It was during this period that a Viking leader named Rurik arrived in the northern lands inhabited by the Slavic peoples, what is now modern-day Russia. At first, the northern Slavic tribes tried to resist Rurik's forces and drive them out of their lands. However, some tribes saw in the Viking strength an opportunity to end their internal turmoil. They invited Rurik to become their leader, to stop the conflicts among them, and unite the tribes. Rurik accepted this invitation, and thus the foundations of the first Russian state were laid in history. There are differing opinions about the origin of the word Rus. However, the generally accepted view is that over time, Rus came to refer to Rurik and certain Slavic groups allied with him, and later to the Rurikid dynasty itself, which gradually became Slavicized. But how did Rurik manage to end the chaos among the Slavic tribes? How did he achieve the unity they had long failed to establish? At that time, founding a state was not possible through civilian development alone, especially in the region where Rurik lived. He used the military power and battle experience of his Scandinavian warriors to subdue or eliminate the tribes that opposed him. This disciplined and powerful force quickly learned to act as one body. The Vikings' main goal was to control the vast stretch of territory running from northern to southern Slavic lands, and thereby dominate the trade routes. Rurik knew that irregular raids could never bring lasting success. Therefore, he advanced with careful planning and steady steps. He turned newly established settlements into military bases, built defensive lines along the borders, and ensured a steady flow of support for his armies. But to achieve his ambitions, the captured settlements needed to be secure, prosperous, and suitable for trade. With the help of his army and allied tribes, Rurik seized various settlements and ordered their reconstruction. To finance these efforts, he began collecting taxes from the tribes. The logic behind this system was simple. The taxes paid would protect both the state and the people. The tribes came to understand that they needed to contribute in order to maintain safety and the flow of commerce. As the state expanded, trade and spoils increased, and everyone shared in the profits. Thus, the people realized that prosperity could only be achieved through unity in the pursuit of common interests. Rurik had laid the foundations of the great state that the Vikings had long dreamed of building on Slavic soil. However, his life did not last long enough for him to see the full maturity of this state. His legacy was carried on by his successor, Oleg. Around the year 878, Oleg conquered Kiev, a city that was strategic not only for the region but also for achieving the Vikings' broader ambitions in Slavic territories. The Vikings did not wish to remain confined to the north. They sought to move southward, to reach the Black Sea trade routes and the grand cities of the Byzantine Empire. For this, they needed a suitable base, and Kiev was perfect for that purpose. By capturing Kiev, Oleg not only completed Rurik's plan, but also changed the fate of the region. The conquest was so significant that some historians regard Oleg, rather than Rurik, as the true founder of the Russian state. Kiev became the capital for Oleg and his successors. To strengthen his power, Oleg first subdued the Slavic tribe known as the Drevlians and began collecting tribute from them. He then extended this system to other tribes, using their payments to finance Kiev's growth. In Oleg's eyes, Kiev was the center for new campaigns, a source of wealth through trade, and the gateway to future conquests. However, there remained one obstacle to controlling all trade routes: the Khazar Khaganate, a Turkic state. The Khazars' dominance in trade hindered Oleg's ambitions. Thus, Oleg allied himself with several Slavic tribes and launched campaigns against the Khazars. The first assaults failed, but Oleg soon adopted a new strategy. He defeated one of the tribes that had been paying tribute to the Khazars, brought them under his own authority, and began collecting that tribute himself. This victory proved to the other tribes that Oleg was the most powerful leader in the region. They now paid their tributes to him instead of the Khazars. In doing so, Oleg weakened the Khazars' income sources and greatly diminished their influence in the area. The time had come to expand the state southwestward, toward the Byzantine routes. At that time, the Hungarians lived southwest of Kiev. To halt Oleg's advance, they formed an alliance with some Slavic tribes and waged war against him. However, they soon realized that the Bulgars were a more attainable target and redirected their forces there. Initially successful, the Hungarians were eventually defeated when the Bulgars received aid from the Pechenegs. Realizing they were surrounded by hostile forces, the Hungarians migrated westward. According to some sources, Byzantine diplomats played a key role in redirecting the Hungarians. It is said that Byzantium, weary of its wars with the Bulgars, encouraged the Hungarians to attack them in order to ease its own burden. If this account is true, it led to a rather ironic outcome. The Hungarians' westward migration ultimately cleared the way for Oleg to reach Byzantium, turning his long-held dream into reality. With the Hungarians gone, no obstacles remained before Oleg. The routes toward Byzantine lands were now open. He quickly sent his merchants into these regions and began preparing to take advantage of Byzantium's weakened state. The Byzantine Empire, struggling to defend its vast territories, was constantly engaged in wars on multiple fronts, leaving it vulnerable to sudden attacks. Oleg recognized this as an opportunity. His goal was not to permanently occupy Constantinople, but to pressure Byzantium into granting trade privileges and tribute agreements. He advanced with his land forces and surrounded the city from the sea with numerous small warships. He plundered the surrounding settlements, forcing the population to take refuge behind the city walls. Eventually, the Byzantine administration was compelled to accept Oleg's terms. A peace treaty was signed between the two sides. Byzantium agreed to pay money to the Rus and to establish trade arrangements favorable to them. With this treaty, Oleg achieved a remarkable victory. He had become one of the most powerful leaders in the region and had made Russia recognized on the international stage. The relationship between Byzantium and the Rus would continue for centuries. Even after Byzantium's fall in 1453, the religious and cultural heritage it represented would persist in shaping the Russian lands. By this period, the Rus state, centered in Kiev, had evolved into a strong political entity, capable of interacting not only with local tribes, but also with great empires. The state that Rurik had once envisioned had now matured in every aspect and secured its place among the kingdoms of Europe. A new power had risen, one whose lands would witness some of history's most defining moments. From the Mongol invasions to Napoleon's armies, from Hitler's occupation to the turbulent years of the Tsarist era.